All right, so just like in our last video where we went over stream flow, I would like to go over audio flow with you guys just before we get into some of the specifics and everything. And also, this is also just to give both for our veterans and our new people, the people freshly trained, the people who are going to be trained in the future, just to give you kind of like a just a diagram to look at to kind of understand how everything's flowing together. Now, for our veterans, I know you guys have been here long before I was here, and you guys helped set up all of this stuff long before I was here. So this is not meant to be an insult to you whatsoever. I just know we've changed a lot of different things, and hopefully this can just be a helpful review if you need it. But if you don't, by all means, go ahead and veteran on, my friends. All right, so audio flow. Let's go over just some of the basics. So obviously, as in any situation where you're running live sound, we've got two basic elements, which is our stage and then our board. And these two components are connected via a connection we call a snake. A snake is a big fat cable that then splits off into a bunch of individual XLR cables that plug into each one of the inputs on our board. And then on the stage side of our snake is just a stage box. So it's just a big old box that has however many inputs you need based off of the size board you're using. It has that many inputs there on stage, right? So then that allows us to have all the inputs we need for the stage side of things and have all of the actual like connectors on the board side of things. That way everything can have its own channel and everything is able to be plugged in to the sound system. And obviously, we'd also, it's kind of implied here that then we'd have a master left and right output that'd be going through speaker cables that would then go to our PA speakers, however many we might have. So here at Grace, we've got 3 PA speakers, and then we've got 2 subs as well. That's all just dependent on what's going on. So all of this, what we're talking about right now, is called our in-house mix. And so the real purpose of this video is we're going to be focusing a lot on the live stream side of things, but I also wanted to just give an overall picture of how our audio stuff is all working together to actually provide sound for 3 separate layers in our service. This is all called the in-house stuff, and the reason it's called in-house is because this is the stuff that's coming out of the speakers and then filling the room or filling the house, right? So this is called our in-house mix. We also have what's called our stream mix, which we're going to go over. And then we also have what's called our in-ear mix, right? So in-house is all the stuff that's coming from the stage, going through the board, and then going back to our speakers. We're now going to go over how it is we get our stream mix as well. And then we'll also go over our in-ear mix. Okay, so our stream mix is accomplished by taking a digital output from our board that then is able to send a channel for channel representation over to our computer. And our computer runs a software called Studio One that's able to act as like a digital version of this huge board here. And it's actually able to do a lot of really cool stuff. It's actually a recording software. And the reason we do this is because it actually allows us to have 2 boards. And so it helps us to accomplish something we needed to accomplish, which was before we were running our live stream mix off of our board. And even though this was functional, it got the job done. It was somewhat limiting at times because what was happening was this: is that you'd make an EQ decision for how, say for instance, my vocal is sounding in the room, right? But that EQ decision might be good for our in-house mix, right? Because of the natural reverb we've got going on in the room, and so you might not put reverb on my voice because you're going, man, there's already a ton of reverb in the room. We don't need more reverb in the room. But here's the deal: is that then our stream mix was a mirror image of our in-house mix, which was not always the best way to do things. So you were having to make EQ decisions, compression decisions, effects decisions, and kind of had them end up getting mirrored for both of these things, even though really it was the best decision for in-house. It wasn't always the best decision for streaming. And so we kind of sat back and tried to figure out what's the best way to take care of this. We thought about having a separate board altogether, right? That way we could have a mix that would just be for our speakers and our in-house mix, and then having all of these individual XLR cables be duplicated, right? So go into a splitter and then get duplicated to then have a second board that would just make decisions for the stream. This obviously gets very complicated. It offers many points for failure at that point too, because you're dealing with double the amount of cables, right? So things could get kind of weird. It also is just more expensive than what we wanted to do right now, right? We would have had to buy a whole nother board, a whole nother digital board in order to be able to have it interact with the computer for live streaming and all that kind of stuff. That's just not the decision we wanted to go with. So we were able to get the same functionality for a fraction of the cost. I mean, this software that we're running on the computer is pretty cheap, but it's very, very powerful and it's professional. It's the same kind of software that you'd use in a professional recording studio setup. Okay, so this computer is pretty much a second audio board, like altogether, and it actually has even more control than our audio board does in-house, which is fantastic because that added control is what you're going to need to make a mix sound good in a pair of headphones, right? There's definitely a lot that goes into mixing in a room and getting our in-house mix sounding good, absolutely. But once you step into streaming land, you're dealing with direct in audio, and what that audio is what you're hearing from my microphone right now, right? So if you and I were talking face to face, you'd actually be hearing technically like an in-house mix, right? Because my voice would be coming out of my mouth and going into the room around, like the air, the space, and you'd be able to hear some of the reflections of the like the reverb, right, of the room as I'm talking, and it makes it sound very natural, and it's what we're used to hearing. When you're hearing my voice right now, it doesn't sound bad because it's just talking, but you're just hearing a direct recording where there's no reverb on my voice, there's no EQ, no compression. This is just a flat recording of my voice going into a microphone and then going directly into your eardrums. And even though for speech that doesn't sound that weird, when you start dealing with music, it sounds very, very strange, and raw recordings do not sound good, right? Raw recordings would be direct in recordings. It's where all you're hearing is just the straight signal from the direct source, and it sounds very, very strange and is not very flattering, right? So there's some added things we need to do to make raw recordings sound good. We need to EQ them to make sure they're not too muddy. Usually raw recordings all kind of have this mid-range frequency stuff that makes them all kind of fight over the same frequencies, and they don't sound fresh, they don't sound breathy, all that kind of good stuff that we love in our favorite songs and albums and all that kind of stuff. So there's some added steps that have to go into making raw recordings sound good, a little bit more than what needs to go in for an in-house mix. Both are difficult, both take talent for sure. No shade on any audio engineers who are doing stuff in-house, but there's some added steps we got to do to make stuff sound good. What's called inside the box, right? So inside recording software. Okay, so our computer is connected to our board via a cable called FireWire. Now, what this allows us to do is it sends a 1-for-1 representation. So channel 1 is sent over the FireWire separate from channels 2 through 32. That way, the computer is able to take all the information, and then it's able to make channel 1 audio go to channel 1 audio here in the computer, and channel 2 goes to its own channel, and so on and so forth. That way we're not having to like deal with something where everything's just being sent all at once and there's nothing we can do, right? It's being sent channel for channel because it's a digital signal. And so the great thing about this is it's able to receive audio to the computer. But here's the thing is that if the audio just stayed there, right, we could get this great sounding mix inside the computer, but if it just stayed there, it wouldn't be helpful for our live stream. And you might think, oh, well, let's just get this computer linked up to our streaming computer. That takes some more stuff that we'll talk about later. But the simplest solution that we found for right now was to just use that exact same wire to send audio back to the board. And this audio gets routed to 2 unused channels here on our board, which is 23 and 24. Now, we keep these faders down all the time for in-service because we don't need them. We don't need to hear the stream mix in our in-house mix because we already have all those instruments. We don't need them to be duplicated. But what we do is channel 23 and 24 gets sent out over aux 4 and aux 5. So 23 gets sent through aux 4 and 24 gets sent through aux 5. And then there's cables that go out from the back of there that we talked about last time in our StreamFlow that then connected into this red box right here, which is called a Scarlett. and then that gets plugged in via USB into our streaming computer. And like I said, the reason we have to do it this way is because it can be kind of expensive, and it's a whole infrastructure change thing we have to do in order to be able to send audio straight from one computer to another computer. You have to set up what's called a Dante network, which we might do in the future. There's huge advantages to it, but it can kind of be more expensive and more complicated than what we needed during this time just to accomplish the things that we're looking to do. So, like I said, this board is able to send a 1-for-1 representation of each of these channels over this FireWire connection into the back of the computer, and then the computer is able to interpret all that stuff, and as we add channels inside our recording software, it's able to decide, okay, this channel 1, I want you to listen to channel 1 over here. Channel 2, I want you to listen to channel 2. And then we're able to add effects in there, add EQ on a channel-by-channel basis, that way we can make the decision that's best for each channel inside the stream, independent from what we're doing over here in the in-house mix. And then ultimately, all these channels get summed up into 2 master left and right channels, and those are routed back to our board with channel 23 and 24 over here. And like I said, that's sent out over aux4 and aux5. There's a physical cable that then gets connected into our red box here, and then it goes off over USB into our streaming computer. Our streaming computer listens to that and then is able to add it into OBS like we talked about in the last video. Okay, but like I said, there's one more element here, right? So we talked about our in-house mix, we talked about our stream mix, but there's also another layer of audio going on in our service, which is our in-ear mix. Now, to be sure, you are not really controlling much with the in-ear mix, right? The purpose that we have this in-ear rack, which is on the right side of the rack underneath the board there at the audio station. The reason we have that is that way it's able to also take a 1-for-1 representation of the first 16 channels. It only has 16 channels, which is okay, because those are the only channels we need for the band up front. The rest of them are all like the handheld mics for ministry ops, or Pastor Johnny or Pastor Mike's or Pastor Rob's microphone when they're preaching, right? The band doesn't need to hear that because we're going to be off stage when they're up there anyways. So we've got 16 channels. It's all the drums, all the instruments, the vocals, and that's able to be a direct 1-for-1 representation. It goes out of this special connection called a DTP. If you look on the back, you'll see back of the board. You'll see like 1 through 16 and then 17 through 32. And it almost looks like a really wide version of an RGB cable. It's like a pin connection, and then those pins are able to grab individual tracks and then send them over the cable. And then they get on the other side of the cable. It's then, I forget if it's 1/4 inch or XLR, but those cables then get connected in 1-for-1 into this mixer. And then this mixer outputs over an Ethernet cable, which then goes up to the stage, and it gets split off into everybody's individual Avioms. Now everybody's able to make individual decisions for how loud they want the bass, how loud they want the vocals, so on and so forth, right? Now, the only reason I bring this up, right, ultimately, when you're moving the fader over here on these boards, you're not impacting the in-ear mix. Just like when you move the fader, you're not impacting the stream mix. We've purposely made it that way. The way that this is all set up is that the only thing that's shared between all 3 elements, so in-house, stream, and in-ear, is the gain knob. And that's the reason is because there's not really a way to get past that. The gain knob is how much strength your signal has, right? So there's not really a way to split off the signal before it's even gotten to become a signal, right? So that gain knob is determining how strong that signal is. So as soon as the XLR cable, say for instance for my vocal mic, hits this the front of the input right here, it's going to go right to that gain knob, and that gain knob is going to adjust how strong that signal is. The stronger that signal is, the less fader you're going to need, the less volume fader up you're going to need. The reason I say all this is because this is the only thing that's shared between all 3 layers. If you boost up this gain knob super high, it has a chance of making stuff distort over here because you're kind of overloading the inputs inside the software. The same thing goes for the Aviom. You can make stuff clip inside the Avioms if you're boosting that gain up too high. And the same thing goes to the other extreme. If you have this gain super low and then you're boosting your fader up super high, that can make it not get enough strength over here to where they're having to move their volume fader all the way up just to be able to barely hear what's going on. And then same thing over here is that it may not be strong enough to where our people up on stage might be trying to max out, say for instance like the electric guitar, and they still can't hear it because the gain is so weak and the signal is so weak. So that's something to keep in mind as you're mixing. In general, I don't think on a week-to-week basis that any of our audio technicians have to adjust the gain very much. There's kind of a range where it's like, okay, it's a little hot, let's pull this back a little bit. Different people sing different ways, different instrumentalists play different ways, so we might need to pull it back a little bit, or, oh, this person's a little quiet, we'll boost it up a little bit. And in general, I've found that all of the gain, I think, is pretty accepting and pretty pretty forgiving in our streaming software and our Avioms. Unless you're really boosting this gain, you shouldn't run into clipping stuff. The main thing to keep an eye on when you're boosting something is just to make sure you're not clipping inside the stream. I feel like of the two other layers, I think the stream is the most sensitive versus the in-ear rig. Well, that does it for this training, guys. Thanks once again for tuning in. I appreciate it a lot. If you have any questions about some specifics of something we didn't cover in this video or something you want help in understanding better, you can feel free to reach out to me or to any of our veteran audio technicians here at Grace. Thanks once again.